Welcome to eCommerce Matters, brought to you by BlackCurve. BlackCurve helps e-commerce businesses make pricing decisions. Today, we're covering the topic, how to price like Amazon. As normal, I'm joined by my glamorous sidekick, Dr. Rob Horton. He's the brains behind the operation. I'm the jazz hand. And we're going, as I said, we're going to look at how to price like Amazon. So full disclosure before we begin. I certainly have never worked at Amazon. Rob, have you ever worked at Amazon? Did you leave that out of your CV when you applied?
No, I've never. I've bought a lot from Amazon. I don't think I've ever worked on Amazon.
Yeah, so probably we both know a hell of a lot about it because we've probably given them far too much of our hard-earned cash over the years. That's certainly the angle that we're coming from. But don't worry, we have done our research. If Amazon's listening, don't worry, we haven't put any spies at bay. We've done our research and are using our experience from our customers selling on Amazon and all the research that we've done to bring you our understanding of how Amazon prices. Now, I think before we've done the disclosure, so there's probably a bit more of a sort of statement that we should say. I fully agree and accept that not everyone likes how Amazon does business. Okay, even talking to my father-in-law, he actively on the golf course encourages everyone he plays with, don't shop at Amazon. I think he's got a bit of a bee in his bonnet about that. Now, whether or not you like their business practices or whether or not you dislike their business practices, what we can hopefully agree on is that they have done fundamentally brilliantly well from an economic and a financial standpoint. Okay, I think Jeff Bezos is currently the richest person in the world. I think he's a Cento billionaire, or what is it, 100 billion? What's that? So really, we're not here to say whether or not we should shop on Amazon, whether or not you should like them or dislike them. Okay, really, what today is about is hopefully give you an insight into some of the pricing techniques that Amazon uses and explore those, and then potentially you can adopt some of those pricing techniques in your own organization. So hey, $1 billion would be nice, wouldn't it? We don't need 100 billion. $1 billion would be nice, or maybe 100 million. We'll call it even there.
I'll take 10. One, if we give it up to me.
So hopefully that sort of set the scene, and we put the kind of caveats in place and what we're about today. So I thought what we might start with is look at set the scene a bit further in terms of to give a feel for why we think Amazon is actually very powerful and progressive from a pricing perspective. So I have gone to the Daily Mail, so forgive me for that, Rob, unless you are a Daily Mail reader, in which case forgive me for assuming that you're not. Are you a Daily Mail reader, Rob?
I think the T-shirt probably says I'm not. The long hair.
The long hair and the tie-dye T-shirt that gives it away. And so there's an article here. It's about how Amazon changes prices upwards of 300 times a day. They've quoted here, and there's two examples that I wanted to pull out. The first of which was a paddle board, and it references and it says over the course of a year it could be bought for as little as £234.87, and as much as £699. That's a difference of £464.13, if we're to be exact. Now that's a pretty wide change and variation in price. If you don't agree, it is. If you don't agree, because I certainly feel it is a wide swing in price. They also quote a Jamie Oliver stainless steel induction saucepan. Have you got one of those, Rob?
No, I don't have an induction hob. I found out that then the other day that you need special pans, and I've just got gas in London.
You can get induction in London, though, by the way. So not
in my rented flat where I'm not paying.
That's true. And again, this podcast is not to challenge which is the best type of cooking equipment. But what we can say is this
if anyone
particular
wants
product.
To be on a cooking podcast, though, happy to come on.
You'll volunteer for that. Maybe we'll do that as the next episode, shall we? I might have to bow out at that point because that's where my knowledge ends. And this particular saucepan had changed price 51 times between first going on sale in sort of November time up to August. Changes 51 times between that period, so kind of 8-9 months, and it went from as much as £44 all the way down to £18.27. Okay, now Amazon has been beaten up quite a lot around surge pricing, and it's certainly in the analysis that we're doing, they're certainly not having as much deep discounts in the blink of an eye. You know, you would certainly never see it go from £464 one day, this paddleboard, to £234 the other day, because, as we've mentioned in other podcasts, customers and consumers massively don't want to be taken advantage of. So certainly from an e-commerce perspective, a retailer where you're selling physical products, surge pricing as a technique is generally recommended to be avoided. But we can see that they are changing prices very regularly. And if we look at Business Insider also, they're quoted as saying Amazon changes prices on its products about every 10 minutes. So, you know, it's kind of, right, you wanted to buy that. What was the last thing you bought on Amazon, Rob?
Roof rack.
A roof rack? Oh, cool. Is this for the polo, is it?
Yeah, it's for my week off, so I need to put the surfboard on it.
Oh, nice. Well, I won't geek out on this topic as well. I think everyone's had my geeking out on outside.
Yeah, the problem is I had to. There's another conversation here on like fulfillment and Prime and the rest of it, which I think is really interesting, because I found myself, I ended up buying the cheap foam one that you throw over the top rather than the expensive fitted one, because I could get it within 2 days and it's roughly fine, and then I'll get a more expensive one.
Well, you see, I'm the muggins who's gone all in on fuel products. Other products are available, but I've gone like all in.
I think you're correct, but I didn't give myself enough time to sort it.
The man's going surfing on Saturday. Nothing's going to stop him, whether it be fuel or foam. He's going.
Yeah, basically. Yeah.
So right. I hope we've set the scene. We've kind of introduced Amazon. For those of you who have been napping, they are a major online marketplace for products. They sell their own products as well as allow retailers to sell through them. So, how do they sell? Where do they start? What's the kind of starting point, Rob?
What's really interesting actually is that for Amazon, pricing is one piece of something I think Amazon do really well in general, and that is data-driven decision making. So I think part of the reason Amazon has been so successful is that they've captured a market and then managed to leverage these data sets cross-functionally and building the infrastructure to do that. And I think the fact that obviously pricing of products in their marketplace is pretty core to them, but that is symptomatic of the kind of really impressive tech infrastructure they built out around. I think it doesn't surprise me. The examples are really interesting. The paddleboard one I can understand because it's a heavily seasonal product, right? And if you say you have limited stock in a warehouse, that's a supply demand equation. Like I imagine, I surf in the middle of winter, but I don't see many other people out there. But in the summer, inflatable paddleboard, off you go. So I can see that massive change in demand. The saucepan is baffling. I'd like to know whether it came back up, whether it was cyclical or whether it just went down. Because it could just be a lot of initial churn in the price. But I think realistically what it is that Amazon wins on average, right? They treat pricing like they treat everything else, and it's an algorithmic problem. It's a big data problem, and so you put in all these data sets, and then you're going to get some weird behavior. But as long as you're consistently winning on average, happy days, right?
Yeah, I'd agree with that very much so, and I think Jeff, we'll call him Jeff because we're clearly best buddies with him now. He regularly says his whole entire business operation, sometimes actually to the detriment. He's had real issues with certainly how he's treated employees and so forth. And we're not going to get into that in today's podcast, but everything he does is based on data and analysis of the data. Okay, and absolutely, there's a time and a place for you to actually suddenly step back and go, hang on a minute, there's other things at play, but very much so across his whole business, most of the decisions are based on what is the data telling me and how am I analysing that and then making decisions.
And from what I know anecdotally, it's really deep within the business in terms of the culture of feedback is built around it and how people give feedback and how people kind of give props to each other and all the rest of it. So that understanding of data is really at the root core. If you were to do my job product at Amazon, you best be a data person, right? Because we're not going to have this conversation, but the design on Amazon's website is not my favorite piece of design in the whole. But the product is excellent in terms of what it does, and actually there's an argument the little edges are there to train you to use their product and keep you in their product and all the rest of it. So yeah, I think part of the reason they're so good at pricing, and this kind of is a broader conversation in e-com as well, is that is using data and using data effectively cross-functionally, and then almost being good at pricing is symptomatic of this data culture that you have in the business.
So we mentioned data. What's the first bit of data that they would be using to support them with a pricing decision?
Well, they're really lucky, right? And this is where we get into kind of interesting territory that we're not going to get into in this podcast, because they kind of own and operate in the market, which is kind of awful, actually, and probably why a lot of merchants and people we talk to don't like them. I don't think it's fair, personally. And that means that they know that to reach their competitors, what they're selling. And so that's kind of that. They know where their competitors have set the price. They also know what they're selling, so they've got their sales data. They also know how much their competitors are selling, actually, if they're operating on Amazon, and that's where that is the line, I think, that becomes anti-competitive, if I'm completely honest, because you don't, if you're operating in Amazon, you kind of have a rough idea of volumes, but you don't know exactly what everyone else is doing that they do. I doubt they Chinese wall it. If someone at Amazon wants to correct me, thumbs up, fair enough. So really, it's no different from what we'd suggest to anyone working in Amazon or working outside of Amazon. You need your competitor data, you want to understand your marketplace, you need your sales, you need your stock levels, and then lots of things. They'll have conversion rate, click through, web traffic, search history, blah 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 blah, all these other sources.
So before we we feel like we've gone from 0 to 100 miles an hour very quickly. Yeah. So let's break those down a bit. So so the first one you touched upon there was competitor data. Okay, so what are the options out there for an e-commerce company who wants to go and collect competitor data?
Well, it's interesting because it is a grey market in that all the prices of all your competitors selling online are freely available online, and it's published information. And it's worth noting that actually there was a case in the US brought by LinkedIn. I think some company called IQ or something had scraped them and were just basically reselling LinkedIn data, and it was found that because it was publicly available, it's fine. So it's less grey than it was actually, which is quite nice. But really, you can work with a provider. We do it. Lots of other people do it. It's quite a common thing, and we will just algorithmically scrape prices for you and other bits of information that you may want, such as whether it's in stock or whether things are refurbished or secondhand, because you might want to exclude those kind of products, or where you are in your Google search rankings. And that tends to be through an Amazon or Google shopping route, because you basically have to come up with, automate the human process of going to a website. So if it's Google shopping, it's easy because I search for the product, And then there's a question of how you do that, but we won't go into that now. But you search for the product and you come back with a list of prices. The great thing about Google Shopping or Amazon is you get like all the competitors, all the people selling there and their prices in a one shot. Where it gets tricky is if you say, well, I want to search at this person's website over here and this person's website over here, because each one of those is kind of a distinct piece of software that needs being built. So most people will just do that kind of straight down the middle automated route, hit Google Shopping or Amazon or whatever. And actually, I think if you think of it from a buyer journey, that's how most people shop anyway now. I certainly do. I know you've got a few pet websites, but if it's not an area you know, say we're not doing like cycling or whatever, but if it's say I just want to buy a roof rack, I don't have any brand loyalty to roof rack selling companies, so I'm just going to say
you don't have a brand loyalty for roof racks.
Well,
you haven't lived, mate, honestly.
I've just got a car, so I think I'm not early enough. I'm too early in the market. Maybe a couple of roof racks in, I'll start developing one. But yeah, the normal buyer journey for me nowadays really is to either just go on Amazon or Google Shopping, and predominantly Amazon, to be honest, and search, and then see what comes up. And that's really what you try to mimic when you're scraping. It's that behaviour and aggregating those prices.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's from an e-commerce company's perspective, it's if you get data from a marketplace like Google Shopping or Amazon, it's a one-to-many, isn't it? Because you search one place and you get very quickly a spread of the market. Whereas if you're going to each individual competitor, you've got to set up an individual scrape, and that website might look different from the next website and the next website. And you can very quickly get into spending thousands, tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of pounds on that kind of technology. Whereas if you're scraping a marketplace, it's very much more of a repeatable mechanism. Now, today we won't go into the pros and cons necessarily of doing one over the other, but you do get more bang for your buck on one.
Sorry, just to jump in, it is worth saying that actually for broad marketplace data, it's very cheap. It's hundreds of pounds, if that, like depending on what you want to do with it and the quality of it. So actually, in terms of the business expense, it's pretty minimal, and that's some pretty powerful data to just get. I think that's really worth flagging, because I think often people think it is more if you've come from a bespoke world, which if you go to someone or you hire a developer to build a scrape for you, that's going to be, let me think, 2 days of work for a site or something at a developer's day rate. So you're getting into £1,000 fairly easily, where you can just go and buy some data for 50 quid. And there is a whole, I mean, it's a very competitive marketplace. There's a whole number of people out there doing it. So it's well worth doing. Just people will give you a trial as well. So even if you want to go and find out, we'll give you a trial, right? So
if you go to BlackCurve.com, you can certainly get Google Shopping data and other marketplace data from ourselves. So okay, so you've got competitor data. You've got visibility. You've got some sense of the marketplace. If we look at come back to Amazon, for example, presumably they're making competitor-led decisions sometimes, right? And sometimes they're not. So what do you need to implement those decisions?
So I would guess actually that Amazon aren't quite doing that. I would think they're probably using them as benchmarks rather than actually making price-led decisions, because what's the, just to stay on the data before we go to the execution bit, I think because they have so much market sales volume data, they are able to do big, robust price elasticity calculations over a range and price that way, and then use the competitive data as kind of boundaries to make sure they don't trip over it.
They're as mature as you possibly could be on the pricing maturity model.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But I mean, it's fair to say, but competitor data is, I think, they're not just using competitor data in isolation, right? It's one part of the decision piece, okay? But it is a starting point, right? So, in order for them to implement the presumably they're not using a spreadsheet to manage this.
I don't know. Maybe it's their new fancy AWS spreadsheet technology they've just released. No, I get it. It may. I mean, it's just interesting. Like So you've got all this data. What do you do with it? Well, I think you've hinted at it there. If you've got, I don't even know how many SKUs are on Amazon, but millions and millions of SKUs. They're not doing much. There's not 4 people in a room doing that by hand, is it? So, and it's actually a very, if you take the data approach and if you care about winning on average, it's a very easily quote unquote, but you can buy software that will easily automate the process for you. If you have an idea of your business logic that you want to apply and the boundaries that you want to set and all the rest of it, you can in effect buy an automatic engine that will feed in the data, and then based on whether how much money you want to make, what's your minimum amount of money you want to make, how risk averse you are, whether who you view as your competitors, how much risk you want to take on, will set the optimum price in the marketplace for you, because it's not just crawling up and down a supply demand curve, because there are business constraints that cut regions of that off, right? In that actually the correct quote unquote price of the market may not be the right price for your business. So and all of that can be handled automatically. So we call that, we've got a pricing engine at BlackCurve. I mean, there are lots of others out there, and what we do is we take all these data feeds, and it's just use the term, it's a sausage grinder, right? You pull the data in, and then it gives you a price at the other side, but it's configurable based on what you want to do, and that is super easy to get going with, super easy to set up, whether it's us or someone else. At that level, it's not actually hard, and Amazon will have a more complicated version. I don't know whether more complicated than us, but probably knowing how scope creep in large corporates, um, because they'll have, I mean, their volume of data will be much larger than what we're used to dealing with, like orders of magnitude, and it will have to pass other robustness tests, scalability tests that we wouldn't, in terms of speed of response and all the rest of it. But realistically, it's probably a few core lines of pricing algorithms on the same data, but with a lot of engineering.
Not a shit ton of engineering, I think you were
That's what I
about
was
to
going to
say. So I think that's great, and I mean, it's certainly, Amazon are a hell of a lot advanced in the pricing maturity curve. So we've touched upon that they're using multiple data sets, but there's certain products which, not your Jamie Oliver saucepans and not your paddle boards. There are certainly products that aren't sexy, that are bread and butter, and I think we've touched upon it a number of times, that are, you've got to be within a certain boundary of price, or otherwise people will go elsewhere. Right? I mean, Amazon probably has quite a heavy influence on what that boundary would be, right? Just surely because of the volume going out.
Yeah, I think that's the curious thing, because actually we spoke about this before, but you can get away with just using competitor data in that regard, because say your competitor is Amazon and they're doing this stuff and you're just tracking them, but you'll be piggybacking on their insight, right? The issue is you run the risk that their insight's nonsense, which when you start getting paddleboard makes sense, like intuitively. There might be something in a Jamie Oliver saucepan. It might have just been a surge price based off a very good marketing campaign or something everyone loved. How many people do you know with induction hobs? It's just kind of hard for me to kind
You're
of
hanging out in the wrong circles, Rob. That's all I'm saying.
No,
induction hobs for the future.
So I won't name names, but a friend of mine showed me his induction hobs, and he's just bought a very expensive flat. So I'm not hanging out with the right people, because it's not my usual social circle.
So I think, and even on our previous podcast, we touched upon it that actually, pre-COVID, during COVID, and as we're seeing outside of COVID, where there is a competitor match, you're in a period where actually 50% of the time, plus or minus, you do need to be within some form of competitor parity.
That's a really good point. That is a period where I could see something like hands going through the roof. It is a COVID-like period. It's amazing how quickly you forget about it. But suddenly, I mean, I've cooked. I know I said I'd volunteer for a cooking podcast, but I've really got into cooking during this. I've spent significant amount of money on kind of cooking equipment and all the rest of it. And there's been supply chain issues, there's been stock level issues, and so why not make the margin? It's not for people don't like price changes. I get that, but also it's not an essential, is it? I mean, it's kind of like it's not like you're charging 100x on hand sanitizer. Um, so I don't know, but I think
So there
it's
are other saucepans available, right? It's not like if you increase the price of all saucepans, you might be said to be taking advantage of your customer. Okay, but if you've spotted a particular niche and you actually spot an increase in demand, why shouldn't you make sure it's win-win, like without taking advantage of the customer?
yeah, for sure. And I also think that like uh, I think it's about what's a fair price at the time. Interestingly, I'm not sure how many people look historically at prices, and I think people are quite good at contextualizing stuff, right? So if um, we keep anecdotes of things we bought in lockdown, right? But we bought some sun loungers, and they're more expensive than they would normally, but we're stuck in the value we associate with them is higher than we would normally, right? So, and they still weren't that expensive, but they're probably 15, 20 quid more than they normally were, which is probably a 30% increase in price. But we couldn't leave the house for 2 months. So, all right, fair enough. You've got stock issues. We need some sun loungers. Here you go.
Here's our credit card.
Yeah,
Off we
exactly.
go, isn't it? And also, I think the reason that I sort of stress that Amazon are not using a spreadsheet to manage their pricing as well to kind of bring it back is we've spoken about previously the concept of striving towards market efficiency, and certainly, yeah, okay, fine. We're not. Today's podcast is not to be to take you through the economists buzzwords 101. But what we've seen is that those businesses that have changed their price more frequently than others, okay, because they've had automated tools in place to do so, they're actually doing a lot better than other, to borrow another term, digital dawdlers, because they're constantly pushing, asking the market, is this the right price, getting a response, updating it, asking the market again, updating it, and they're pushing for that perfection. Perfection doesn't exist. Again, this is not a philosophical discussion, but they're constantly pushing the boundaries, and a pricing tool enables you to do that.
Yeah, and we see that, right? We've talked about this before, I think, but when you add a new product, when people start working with us, we see a lot of price changes initially, and then it settles down, and that is because markets. Well, I used to say the markets don't change that frequently. It seems like they do change quite frequently in a minute, but if you take a bit of time to get used to it, and then when you're there, actually the market doesn't change that much. There's also kind of a wasted. One of the great benefits of automating is it's sitting there doing it for you, and it knows when to adjust, when to check, and when to look, and you don't have to, because otherwise you'd probably be spending a lot of time being like, do I need to do anything? No. Do I need to do anything? No. Do I need to do anything? Oh, blimey. And then he'd have missed it by 2 days. This is more true for kind of like FMCG, kind of high volume, highly competitive products. If you've got a few key lines um, that are really kind of sensitive in some way, or that you really understand, then automating those will probably work relatively well, but may not work as well as if you were doing it otherwise. But it's hard to know. It's the analogy I often use is kind of the robo investing quant side of it, which I come from, versus stock picking. And so again, like if you're building an automated portfolio, you bet you make hundreds of thousands or thousands of small bets rather than a few very big bets, right? And it's the same thing. Humans are really good at focusing in on and really understanding how a few things behave. So if you sell 7 products, you don't need an automatic tool, right? You probably need the competitor data, interestingly, and you might need something to plumb it all together, and you might need the insight. You probably don't need something to manage the actual process of it automatically. Whereas if you've got thousands and thousands of products, you're probably losing so much in efficiency on the 900 or the 90% of it that you're not looking at, just that it's just worth plugging in.
And invariably, certainly what we see, that a lot of the initial gains are in your long tail.
Yeah.
Okay, because you haven't had enough time to focus on those. I mean, let's put it another way. If you increase the price of one of your high performing products, you only benefit on the delta between your old price and the new price, don't you? Mm-hmm. Whereas if you're not selling some of your long tail and suddenly you make a pricing decision and manage to sell it, you're bagging the whole sale from naught to whatever the price point is. So that's what automation allows you to get.
So I love that point, and I feel like we get in trouble for this a lot. Because
we never get in trouble, surely.
No, but it's quite contrarian, and I think it's like it goes against how people want to run their business fairly obviously. But price increases are often significantly worse than price decreases, or like I much prefer price decreases, because price decreases have lower risk and much higher upside. Because and the reason is this correlation between price and volume, because the holy grail in pricing always has seemed to me for people is that, if I can just increase and I can get a bit more margin, and maintain, if I can maintain volume, that'd be fantastic. Fine for it at the product level, not fine at the gross level, right? Like, because the benefit of dropping a price is that suddenly you might massively spike the volume, right? And it's lower risk, because if I increase the price, I'm price testing. If I don't have enough data, if I don't have enough data to do a robust price elasticity, I could drop off a cliff, right? I can suddenly trip over a competitor that I'm unaware of, or just or a kind of a cannibalistic product or whatever, and suddenly no one wants to buy it anymore. So I've gone from selling 100 units a week to 0 units a week just through a small price increase. Whereas if you go down, price that you know the price didn't do that, right? Price, the other demand factors maybe, but it's unlikely that people aren't going to buy something because it's a little bit cheaper. And I think that's a really counterintuitive point almost for a lot of people, because you think about margin sacrifice at the individual product level, and I think it goes back to what did Amazon do really well. And I think that paddleboard's a really interesting example, because of the way their supply chain is so efficient, and that's another thing that they're very, I think I could go on a 2-hour rant about supply chains in the fishing industry, but I won't. It's been really frustrating for my holiday. But what that allows them to do is that they can make the decision actually, because they can keep the stock in, or they can obtain it whenever they need to. They can sell at any time of the year, right? For a lot of people we talk to, the issue is seasonality, and the reason they don't want to decrease price is because they feel like they're losing out on a sale at another time. I think it's actually it's kind of a symptomatic of lost sales fallacy, because I don't think it's true. I kind of feel that, like, if you can sell something and replenish it and make margin on it, you probably should be doing that. But that's another debate. But what Amazon are doing with that huge swing in the paddleboard is selling paddleboards in winter, right? In that, okay, we'll catch those few smart people, because they have the warehouse and infrastructure and the rest of it, that they can kind of keep it in stock. They think, I want a paddleboard for next summer, I'll get one now, and it's a third of the price. But then they also catch the uptick in the summer, and because they can replenish their stock levels, it kind of doesn't matter, if that makes sense. So you could.
Yeah, so I'll expect that oddly shaped present under my Christmas tree from yourself, shall I? As I have a giant paddleboard. Well, they're inflatable, aren't they, these days?
They're inflatable, yeah, they pack up. I didn't realise they're actually really cool. If I move back to Guildford, I'll get one to go down the canal.
Okay, so we've spoken about you've got to get competitor data. We've spoken about you've got to put a pricing tool in place to enable you to automate the decisions. Now, I'm very passionate about making sure that you don't blindly follow competitors for the sake of doing it. It's one of the reasons that I founded BlackCurve in the first place. And also, we've spoken about, very quickly we went from 0 to 100 miles an hour and spoke about the fact that Amazon are extremely clever at their pricing, and so competitor data is not all they're looking at. Take us through some of the data sets that, one at a time, that they're also using to support the algorithms that go into their pricing decision process.
Yeah, well, I have to caveat this with I don't know for sure, right? But anecdotally from the research I've done, it's not dissimilar to what we talk about. You've got your core ones, right? You've got your marketplace data, so that's competitive pricing, competitive behavior. You've got sales of the products, and they have that aggregated at marketplace level, which seems anti-competitive. And then they've got all their site traffic data because they control the portal. So they've got things like basket conversion. They've got things like search terms, like all this stuff, and all of this will layer in. You can go on. They actually bubble some of this up. So they've got a trending kind of top sellers kind of page that they surface in different categories. So you can go in that and look at that. And if they're surfacing that, you know they're using it. The other thing I will add, and I think that you mentioned it in passing, I don't know if you meant it or not, but they're looking at it, right? Because Amazon has a really cool, I mentioned at the start, but a really cool infrastructure. It's all APIs, it's all microservices. Sorry if I'm going too technical, but basically it's all hooked up and it all talks to each other, and you can build a dashboard and say, I want to hit this data from this point, this from this point, this point. And this lets you kind of intuit and sanity check, because I would, again, echo you, I don't think you should follow prices blindly. I think you should be checking big data things go wrong, you can still fix it, you can make it better. It's not set and forget, right? I think people often think that with kind of pricing. Well, I've got my competitive prices and I set up my pricing engine and I'll leave it. But your business is different from the other person's business, and the marketplace changes. So you need to be kind of interrogating the data, all these data sets. And the more you can layer in, the more insight you can get, I think, if I'm honest. And then by interrogating them, you can tune your strategy. You can uncover things that, oh, I'm converting here. Why am I converting here? Well, I put a load of marketing spend. I haven't had to drop the price to match competitors here because people are buying because that advertising strategy works great. So I can take that out of a competitive pricing strategy. Conversely, I'm not selling any of this. I'm priced competitively in the marketplace, and I've spent a load of advertising money on it. So there's clearly no demand for it. So I should stop investing in this product, because it doesn't matter whether I spend or not. It doesn't matter if I change my price or not. I'm still not moving the dial on the sales. And this is why interrogating the data becomes so important on top of the obtaining and just automating and using. It's kind of the next piece, because it builds the flywheel. It helps you improve it.
Yeah, and I think and just to add to that, if you've got your pricing tool in place, your pricing tool is making decisions on a mass scale, right? So it's rapidly making lots of decisions. And if you have a good one, what it should also then be doing is raising to you the exceptions that we've got crap data here, or we're missing a data point here, or for some reason this is an anomaly, this doesn't normally happen, go and investigate it. Because pricing touches so many other areas, you've got to make sure that you're managing those exceptions, because otherwise then it will be making bad decisions. So you've got to have that tool which enables you to manage that.
The tool assumes good data, right? It's garbage in, garbage out. And I am sure that one of the things Amazon have done is invest a lot of money in data processing, pre-processing, so that they know that before a data point is used in any decision, the quality of it is super high. And the really nice thing about that, from a business perspective, why I think it's often really worth investing in, is it's the same data sources you use everywhere. Like, it's the same pricing does have a particularly high bar for data quality, but the same data that you'll be using for your PPC decisions, or really just accounting and auditing, right, is or product sourcing, or market insight, or marketing, or whatever, is the same data you use for pricing. And the cleaner that data is, and the better process that data is, the more you'll get out of it. Because, for example, we've done a whole podcast on it. competitor data can be really, really bad. It can be really messy, and it does require a significant amount of cleaning often and knowledge about it before it can be used, because you get a whole host of nonsense. You get secondhand products, you get eBay, you get all kinds of things that Google Shopping can't tell apart. You get Google Shopping trying to be helpful and suggest things to you that isn't a like-for-like match of your products, so you're not comparing apples with apples. So I think part of building this, yes, you get your data, and yes, you get your engine, but there's this really important middle piece, which is cleaning and curation of that data to make it usable.
Yeah, and also, I mean, so assuming you've got the process in place, assuming you've got the tool in place to support you with that cleansing, you're then moving on to the actual fundamental pricing decisions themselves. And I think it might be worth saying that, you know, we use the term sales history a lot. I think we should probably have a bit of a swear jar every time we mention it, because anybody outside of BlackCurve is probably going, what are they wanging on about? They keep talking about sales history. But what we mean by that is the data set of your individual transaction at checkout. So that paddleboard was purchased on Tuesday on the 7th of July at this date. So we the 7th of July, goodness me, I should know. We are, hooray.
Hey,
got
lockdown, I have no idea, like absolutely no idea.
So with it, you know, that, and it was purchased for £300. Okay, and then that's what we mean by sales history. It's building up those individual transactions. On the 8th, it was bought for £302. On the 9th, it was bought for £304. As the volume picks up, you pull all that data in, and this is what fundamentally enables you to dovetail this data set with your competitor data. I mean, give you a.
Sorry, I was just going to jump in on that, because we said we talked about this at the start, but we haven't. Part of the reason they're making so many price changes is to build out that data set, right?
Bingo. They are rapidly price testing on a mass scale, and as much as, you know, on the Daily Mail might say, well, they've had huge swings in price. What they're doing is they've put their foot, the algorithm put its foot slightly on the accelerator. Okay, and it's nudged the price, and it's assessing, has it changed my volume up or down? And then if it's gone up or down, they keep going, and they're working out, and it's doing that on a mass scale, constantly pulling.
What some smart cookie at Amazon has done, it would have bucketed cookware products and found a representative cookware product, right, which is your Jamie Oliver saucepan, and then they've said, we're going to take the margin hit on this to understand the pricing dynamics of this as a whole. They sell it over a wide range, right? And then they build that, and from that they can extrapolate to cookware, because one saucepan is much like any other saucepan. It doesn't matter. I mean, that's not true at all. But like,
I thought you said you're an expert, Rob, of cooking.
No, I'm going to rephrase this in the correct way. When you're clustering products, one saucepan is much like any other saucepan in terms of its dynamics in a marketplace. It has different market dynamics to diamond rings, for example. So you can extrapolate the price elasticity constant calculated for that, or a subset of things. They probably don't agree with them. They only found one of them that represent kitchenware, and then can then use that, right? And then so by sweeping that range, they can then say, okay, we price it here because this is volume times margin, or however you want it, whatever you're maximizing revenue or profit. This is the point that gives us the most margin. Set the price there. Off you go.
So you can only do that if you have a pricing tool in place to enable you to do that on a mass scale. Because we've spoken previously as well about, you know, is price elasticity a dark art? It seems like it's aspirational for companies. But the reason that it's generally so terrible to use it is because businesses haven't changed their price often enough to be able to have a sensible output from it. So therefore, what Amazon are basically doing is they're changing the price so much so that they can have a big enough data set to then reinforce their algorithms for when they do work out what the best price is. And then they know at any given point, if we change the price here, this is what the volume is going to be. And therefore, to come back to the paddleboard, they know if they change the price at Christmas, they know what the sale through is going to be on paddleboards. That's why the price is changing so much.
And the other thing that you said that is key is that actually people struggle with pricing engines because their data quality is not high enough. And then not also, I think there's often an understanding gap as well in that, like, it's it's a complex thing, and optimization is a complex thing, and understanding that sacrificing on a range of products to pick up over a whole kind of gamut elsewhere. If you're not au fait with big data statistics, probability, if you don't come from that background, it is difficult to get your head around. So I can understand why some people are resistant, especially if actually they haven't. That's why we keep saying fundamentals, right? Get good competitive data, make sure it's clean. Then you can see the difference, and then you understand it. Then you can, okay, what do I add in next? Use my transactional data. Okay, I clean that, I aggregate that. Because again, there's a whole thing like we could do why transactional data is crap. It tends to be cleaner because it's often used for accounting, but that accounting often happens outside of where you're doing it, right? So an example is fraudulent activity, right? So you could sell 10 of a high ticket item, and a pricing algorithm pick up on that and go, happy days, and someone's been trying to defraud you, and they're not real sales. So there's not uptake in the marketplace. It's changing a price otherwise. So you need to get this kind of data quality framework going to really benefit. And I would say from any digitalization of your business, this isn't pricing, this is whether you're doing digital marketing. In fact, it's probably more important for digital marketing in a lot of ways because your expenditure on digital marketing is probably a lot higher than your expenditure on price.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, just as we come up to the top of an hour in our world, you're not listening to it live, but it might be worth just touching upon some of the other data sets that feed into the algorithms that Amazon are likely to be using to support their decision making. Now, we can make assumptions, but certainly our analysis that we've done across multiple sectors and a range of sizes of e-commerce companies, actually you get a hell of a lot of way by using your sales history, your transactional data to support you to build up those models to work out what the sweet spot should be. But Amazon is also using additional data sets above and beyond that. So just to kind of I am going to have to go a bit quick on these, so forgive me. You've got the likes of the weather, for example. So why would that be interesting? Well, you're not going to sell many umbrellas when the sun is shining, right, outside. But when the weather is crap, if you do analysis of umbrellas, they're more than likely to be more expensive during the winter than the summer. To give you a feel, that's a very simple, high level example, but it's just just hoping to put that into your mind of you're overlaying all of these decisions on top of each other, and that's what the math is doing.
What's key with those ones is these become predictive indicators of demand. That's what they're trying to get to, right? So you've got your supply and demand curve, that's fine. You've got your sales history, and you've got your competitive data, but that's often. So we talk about competitive data as a lagging indicator. Sales history is a point in time indicator. It tells you the state of the market now, and then you start using things like the weather, web traffic, conversion, blah 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 blah. These tend to be predictive indicators, so you can predict that surge or that surge in demand, such as seasonality, or something becomes popular on Instagram for some unknown reason. This is a bit out both of our comfort zone, but sure, because you never know that. Like,
we've all got hundreds of thousands of followers on Instagram. You can announce your Instagram handle at the end of the podcast.
I don't actually. I deleted it because makes me not do my job because I just go on Instagram. So I got rid of it.
now he tells me in a live recording.
All these are trying to do is kind of work out the demand for something before that demand actually kicks in, because obviously you can react to the market, great. If you can start driving the market, great. Then if you can be reactive to consumer demand, and this is where you're going with the weather, web traffic, search terms, blah 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 blah. this is where you really win, because then you're actually able to get ahead of the curve and set your price.
Absolutely. It's getting to that reactive stage, because if you know that if I have this much traffic on my website, this much traffic looking at that product, and you know what the conversion rate will be, that's when you can start to do fantastic price tests of changing the price and work out, right, the dissection of my web traffic's this, the weather's this, if my price is this, what does then the conversion rate look like? But if you're doing that on one product, if you or I are managing that and are waiting, it's going to take us a hell of a long time. Okay, so we've got to unless we're only selling one product and it's £1 million a time, and
put
sell
your
one of
calendar
those
to change your price every Monday.
Yeah. Every Monday, push the price up by £1. But if you're doing it on a mass scale, if you're changing prices regularly, I mean, our studies have shown that in terms of frequency, multi-times a day, you start to get into laws of diminishing returns. But certainly, if you're overlaying all of these data sets into your algorithm, you're making sensible decisions off the back of that using sound logic. You should be shooting for, at the very least, running those rules once a day. You might not be changing the price on all the products every day, but it should be running the rules and the algorithms and the maths once a day.
I agree. It is worth saying that is heavily related to the volume that you're selling. So Amazon will be doing hundreds of price changes in a day because the scale at which they operate is much higher, right? Whereas if you're selling,
and that's why doing it multiple times a day for them makes sense, doesn't it? Yeah. Whereas if you're £1 million revenue company, you're physically not going to have enough data. I mean, to a certain extent, I would challenge if you're a 50 million revenue company. Again, if you're going to have enough data, it depends what your sales volumes are like and what your average order size is.
I would guess that Amazon were over optimizing. I think it becomes diminishing returns after a point, because it's not like you're trading in the stock market, right? And actually you're making money on slight, like you've got a singular relationship with buyer and consumer. You don't have other people interacting in that transaction. So it's that intraday stuff for me, and the way consumer buying cycles have. I mean, it's a whole other debate, but it's just it feels like you're more likely to annoy someone and stop them buying if you're changing too often than otherwise. But if you control the marketplace, honestly, you can do what you want.
And with that, shall we end? Should we summarise what we've covered? So really, we started by saying that Amazon are making data-driven decisions, and that, if you don't remember anything from what we've spoken about today, that should be what you hang your hat on. There are a number of ways that you can get lots of tools to support you with that. From a pricing perspective, BlackCurve itself, shameless plug, we help businesses automate their pricing decisions, and we've done a lot of the maths, a lot of the analysis to give you the algorithms which enable you to make smart pricing decisions using your competitor data, using your sales history, using your stock levels, and more. Okay, you can start small and grow with it. So don't go 100 miles an hour straight away. But fundamentally, Amazon, if you want to price like Amazon, they're not just using competitor data. They're using multiple data sets. They've applied maths to it, and they've automated it to make decisions at scale. Okay, is that a good summary, Rob? Do you reckon? Anything more to add?
No,
I'll take the and I'll take the and a shrug, and we'll end it there. Well, thank you very much, everybody. This is eCommerce Matters. We are BlackCurve. We help e-commerce businesses make pricing decisions. Today, we've been tackling the question how to price like Amazon. We'll see you next time. Take care.